Thank you. We have a very distinguished speaker this afternoon, Jacob Umali Gordon, who will be talking about the Civil Rights Commission and its work. Dr. Gordon was a graduate of Bethune-Cookman and went on to get a doctorate at the University of Michigan in history and had taught a number of years at the University of Kansas, where he was recognized as a distinguished professor. And since retiring and coming to Gainesville, he has been equally active in social justice and historical operations here in our city, and has been the president of the United Nations Association and a number of other organizations, and left his imprint here as he has around the world, including a time in the University of Ghana. So I hope I haven't taken too much of his time. So if you will take over.
Thank you, Richard. Let me add a few things to what you just said about me. I came here from Switzerland, 1960, to Daytona Beach, where I earned my first degree in history. I went to Howard University for my master's degree and a PhD from Michigan State University, with a postdoctoral work at USC in gerontology. Taught at Albany State in Georgia for 3 years and moved to Kansas 1970, where I stayed for 35 years and retired as emeritus professor. I decided to come back home to Florida, where my American journey started in 1960. I'm a historian by training, and I did American history even before I came to America. Under the British, we studied very carefully the British Empire. That's what we were taught in British schools when I was in Nigeria. I came here as a British subject. Although I was born in Nigeria, I have never been a Nigerian, because Nigeria was not independent when I came here. And so this is where I am. I'm married, I have 6 children, and they are everywhere, from lawyer to engineering. One of them, my granddaughter, is in South Florida, one in DC, one in Dallas, and the list goes on. Since I retired in 2004, I came here and I wanted to be around a university town. I was in Lawrence, the University of Kansas, for those years. And I found a place here in Gainesville, but I was very familiar with the University of Florida. In fact, one of my colleagues, Chuck Sidney, lives in this facility. He was professor and chair of history department at University of Kansas when he came here to become dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. I hope to see him sometime very soon. Come to the subject of today. I want to thank those of you who are here in person and the rest of you on Zoom for the opportunity to share with you some of my experiences that also involve some of my academic work. It's a very large topic. I want to talk today about the role of the Civil Rights Commission. Because very often people who are teaching civil rights, who talk about civil rights, they tend to either ignore it or don't know about the Civil Rights Commission. We talk more about the activism on the streets. Now we talk about this special opportunity that Eisenhower created in 1957. But as a context to what I have to share with you, I want to go through a few things very, very quickly so that we have a clear understanding of the role of the Civil Rights Commission in the civil rights struggle. So this morning I thought about, today is April 24, 2024. I looked throughout history pages to find out whether there's any great event that relates to today, and I found one. It was in 1877. A gentleman was a military officer by name Rutherford Hayes, who became our 19th president from Ohio, stopped the federal troops from fighting with the southern troops, particularly in Louisiana. That was the period of reconstruction in American history. By freeing the Louisiana people from engaging with the war, he said is something very, very important for us to remember. It was on this day, 24 April 1877. By doing so, he ended the Reconstruction period in 1877. He also created something else. He gave rise to white supremacy, not only in the South, throughout the country. And so at the end of the Reconstruction, Jim Crow expanded. That is very an appropriate date to begin this talk this afternoon, to reflect back many, many years ago, what happened and the impact of President Hayes' decision on American society as we speak on this day. I want to begin by trying to define some key words to allow us to understand the role of the civil rights. These are words you're all familiar with, but they all have different definitions for different people. So I begin with the key word, civil rights. What is civil rights? Another word we use interchangeably with civil rights is human rights. What are human rights? Let me define my way civil rights. Civil rights are rights that are given by state based upon their laws. The right, for example, to education. The right to be with whoever you want to be with. And most importantly, the right to vote. These are examples of civil rights. Human rights are a little bit different. Since 1948, the Declaration of Human Rights in the UN, which was actually led by Eleanor Roosevelt, and we tend to forget that. Those are rights to life. Because you are a human being, you have certain rights to life. Life, respect for human dignity. They are not quite the same. One is by the law of the state. And you will see there are many examples when you go through American history. A lot of laws that were developed from the colonial period, even until the time of independence, and even post-independence. Those are all laws. Those are civil rights by laws. But the human right is life, right to life. Somebody used the term inalienable rights. We are born with those rights. So they are different, even though we use them interchangeably. So what is critical race theory? Is another common word that people throw around. You will see on my note there, bibliography. When I was teaching civil rights history to undergraduate and upper class students and some of our students in law school at the University of Kansas, I used Derek Bell's book. Derek Bell was a black lawyer who was very well known at Harvard. And he wrote that book entitled Race and Racism and American Law. Since I adopted that book, I never taught civil rights history without referring my students to original documents that speak for themselves. Laws passed by states, Jim Crow laws. I didn't write them. In fact, a state had just invoked a law in Arizona, 1864. I think you know about that. Those were the kind of laws that were passed by states. So if you go into the text, go into laws passed by each state in the union, you will find out what it actually means. But critical race theory, going back to Derek Bell, is a theory in legal studies. We have feminist theory in legal studies. We have also critical race theory. It's just to explore the role of race and racism in our legal system. I was having lunch with a friend this afternoon, talked about what happens in our prison system. All you got to do is go through our prison system or go through our legal system and see what we mean by critical race theory. It's a way to try to understand why we do, what we practice in our legal system, which has never been void of racial discrimination or even gender discrimination. Now, the word woke has been used by many politicians. I have always thought the opposite of sleep is to wake up. And God knows our revolutionaries were woke. They wanted us to become independent. They were not sleeping. I let the British crush them. They were not sleeping when France came to our aid. They were woke. It doesn't mean anything derogatory. The other term that people use very often is sexism. People think that civil rights is only about black and white. Gender is also a part of the civil rights movement. It's a part of the human rights movement. And sexism is very common in our society. You know more than I do, when women were even allowed to vote in our society, in a free society, independent for years and years and years. On jobs, on court system, judicial system, how we have neglected and discriminated against people because of their gender. So we need to understand those terms. Then we talk about other rights that are not even maybe a part of the movement, what actually is leading the movement. Some rights are greater than others. Generally, we think that voting right is utmost. Without your voting rights, what do you do? So I thought we need to define some key terms and then look at the other thing. Let's move it. The suffrage movement is a part of the movement also. All right, thank you. So what are some historical contexts that we need to understand when we look at, before we look at the role of the civil rights movement itself? Here they are, you have some of them in your hand. You have the Native Americans who've been here for, as far as Florida is concerned, for 12,000 years. And when we look at civil rights, we look at the actions of people against people of color and against women. When I say people, I'm leaving out another group, white males. What did they do in American history? Two important key things. The way we treated with the Native Americans, the Indian Removal Act of 1830. In 1830, there were no bicycles, no cars, no airplane. They were told, get out of here, go to plantation. The Trail of Trails. They were marching to Oklahoma. They died. Few of them got there. Another great historical movement we ought to understand in the context of civil rights is the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade is a major historical movement all over the world. But that was the worst form of slavery in all human history, the transatlantic slave trade. I was reading very recently the poems from Phyllis Whitley, the first enslaved person captured in Africa, West Africa, at the age of 7 and sold to somebody in Massachusetts. And she became a great poet, a great writer. Perhaps the first published work of poetry in American history. Lived only about 31 years. Born 1753. So those are the kind of things that we have to understand before we start talking about why are people running around and marching? They're marching for freedom. They're marching for their civil rights as defined in the American Constitution. They're marching to end Jim Crow. Now, if you look at the structure of our system, that's one thing that I call America's promise. We were never established, 1776, to become a perfect union. It was imperfect. And so we keep on struggling to achieve that American promise. The hope that one day all human beings in this society will be treated equal. I guess that's the essence of democracy. It's against this background, as people were marching in the 50s, a young man by name, he was not young, he was a general from Kansas, President Eisenhower, was a Republican. He created the Civil Rights Commission. That's what I want to talk about. What is the Civil Rights Commission? It's almost lost in the history of civil rights. People only focus on activism. When he came to the office, they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1957, which is very significant in terms of this subject. The question is, what was the goal? What were the goals of the Civil Rights Commission when it was established? How did it function? What did it accomplish? I mean, out of that, we can learn some lessons that will allow us to move forward. When the Civil Rights Commission was established, here's the structure. There was a National Civil Rights Commission. A number of the Civil Rights Commissioners were appointed by the president. I believe equal number was appointed by the Congress. And their main job was to act as an investigative body to look into what's going on in American communities, to investigate, to get the facts out, and present those facts to Congress for further legislation or for action. That was the primary objective of the Civil Rights Commission. Added to the Civil Rights Commission in Washington, D.C., they also created civil rights committees in every state of the Union. Every state has a civil rights committee. And what I want to share with you today is my experience in Kansas. I was lucky enough, I guess with my big mouth, to be approved by Congress as the chair of that state commission for a number of years. I served 2 terms, 6 years. What I want to share with you what happened in 1995, I believe, 1988. When I became chair of the Civil Rights Commission, we met very often, especially what we know what happened in the 60s, the legacies of the 60s. You will remember particularly in 1968. Some historians have characterized that period as a turning point in American history, 1968. 2 great important people to American society were assassinated. Kennedy first. A few more later on, Bob Kennedy. King, Dr. King, and Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, was Attorney General in California. He was running for election, and he was winning all the primaries. They decided to take his life. King was also assassinated in Memphis. 2 very important incidents took place in 1968. What is more than that? That was also a year of America's greatest achievement. The first manned spacecraft went through the orbit, circled around the moon, and came back, and paved the way for landing the moon in 1969. You remember that? What else happened in 1968? Very important. It was at the peak of demonstrations for the Vietnam War. Everywhere, every campus, just like what's going on right now in Colombia, everywhere else. Very, very important. What else happened in 1968? Oh, the Civil Rights Commission of 1968. And the election of who? Nixon. 1968. Robert Humphrey loved the election. And Nixon became president. So people were moving. 68 was a key turning point in American history. Something else very important happened. For the first time in American history, they showed a television program that showed interracial kissing. Kiss. In Star Trek. That shall not touch. It was in 1968, that Civil Rights Act of 1968 reaffirmed what happened in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 when Lyndon B. Johnson was president after the assassination of King. of Kennedy. So, what does that 68 say? Civil Rights Act. We thought civil rights 1964 has solved all problems. Lo and behold, black folks, I don't care how much money they had, they couldn't buy houses. To cut the story short, it was called the Fair Housing Act. When I went to Kansas, I saw what I call redlining. Even as free as we call free state of Kansas. There was redlining. What's redlining? Anybody black here know what I mean by that? If you are black, you can real estate will not sell you the house in where you want to buy the house. That's within the real estate business. Civil Rights Act of 1968 changed that. And I want to share with you a very recent publication, reference to 1968, 1960s. It's not on my reference, but you can add this to that. It's a recent book published by Doris Goodwin. She's a presidential historian. She just came out with a book this year. An Unfinished Love Story, colon, a personal history of the 1960s. A personal history of the 1960s, where she also touched about 1968. There is one person I know who has been able to combine biography plus memoir plus history. She put all those three together and got this book published. You should read it if you have time. It's very recent. Anyway, those were the legacies. In the 70s, that the Civil Rights Commission had to face. When I was chair of the Civil Rights Commission in Kansas, there were riots, there were complaints, they were everywhere, especially in rural Kansas. Kansas is a very small state, still less than 3 million. It's mostly rural. If you go beyond Kansas City, it's a twin city with Kansas City, Missouri, to Wichita, the rest of them. Topeka is actually rural in my judgment, which is the capital. The rest of them are rural, especially western Kansas. But very, very industrious. Very good economy. So when we get complaints, I assemble the team and we go into those communities to conduct thorough investigation. That is the mission of the Civil Rights Commission. Every state has it. And they have chairs approved by Congress, by the President of the United States. When we conduct those investigations, we write them up. We don't put them in the archive. We send them to the White House and to the Civil Rights Commission in Washington, D.C., their headquarters. They take the document, they study them. It is out of those documents they recommend to Congress for legislation. That was the function of the Civil Rights Commission. It's activist, but it's actually very academic, very thorough investigation, where we call in witnesses from all sides. We did one in Garden City. Let me see here. Give exactly the date. This was in Garden City Community College, this document. That's where we did it. Yeah, that was in 1995. I pull it out, it's like a book. This is just one investigation. Just one. In rural Kansas. Garden City is a very small community. It's about maybe 22,000, 23,000 by now, people. about 50, 70% white population. Less than 1% Native Americans. African Americans about 4 to 5%. And that is the actually ratio in the whole state. African Americans about 5% when I was there. And a number of foreign-born immigrants. They had meat industry, they have manufacturing, they have hotels, and so on and so forth. The complaint we got was there was discrimination on the basis of race, not religion, not at that time, not even about gender, it was the basis of race. We go to the community college. I believe we spent 2 days at least to get testimony. Very, very tedious job. And we have very good protection whenever we go anywhere to investigate. And we compiled all the evidence, all the information, came back to Topeka and get all written down and mailed to Washington, D.C. Let me share with you some of our findings in Garden City. People of color could not buy houses. There was separation. It's just like this section of town, little town, is for you folks. And this side is for white people. Even up to employment in the meat industry. They did crazy job, pick out the floor, trash, whatever it was. They had the menial jobs given to them, not based upon their qualifications, as we investigated them. There were people from migrants, Hispanic, with good qualifications who could not have any job. They would not even be employed at Garden City Community College. Community college there in Garden City was probably about, even though the entire population of whites there, about 54%, the enrollment was probably about 90-something%. And so other people have to travel somewhere else to the next little community for jobs. Garden City was very, very important. It's in Western Kansas. A lot of manufacturing jobs in there, but these people really had no jobs. So we find a number of discriminations in Garden City when we finish the report. This is just one report. There are very many others. We did a report in Topeka and at Washburn University. When students were complaining at a private university about what's going on campuses, and that engaged all the state universities, including the so-called flagship University of Kansas, when the enrollments were very, very, very little. I went there in 1970 actually to develop an African Studies program, 1970. When I got there, one group wanted a Black Studies program. The chancellor said, Black Studies is not academic. We'd rather have an African Studies program. I said, fine. And by the same token, members of the BSU, Black Student Union, they said, no, we don't want Black Studies program. We want African Studies program because we're Africans. I said, oh my Lord, for 2 different reasons, we have a consensus here. I said, okay, we have African Studies program. So we had a Department of African Studies. I wrote the proposal for a degree program. First degree was awarded in 1972. I was there for only 2 years and hired the faculty. So there were some complaints that were coming from other universities. They wanted the teaching of that in a curriculum to relate to their experiences, whether it was Kansas City or whether it was Western Kansas. So we investigated all of that to see activism on college campuses. We also sent the report. I don't have that report. I only brought this one to share with you. Here's the question. What's the impact? Because other communities were having their own civil rights report. What's the impact of the Civil Rights Commission? I would say it's tremendous. I spent some time in the Eisenhower Library in Kansas to see communication between him and African American leaders and the progress that was made because of the Civil Rights Commission. They have been measured. There are a lot of scholars who have done that study. And yet there's very little known about the Civil Rights Commission because it was kind of quiet. It was research-based, so to speak. We were not marching on the street. Even though people were marching on the street, gave us the attention, the liberty to actually convene these hearings. A lot of them were invited. Those people were on the street to come and present their case to us before we got them down. So that's so much I can tell you. It does have impact. It's measurable. It improved. It helped us to move towards a more perfect union, whether it's on the campus or real estate. Before I left Kansas, you could buy a house almost anywhere. When I first went there, they won't even count the salary of my wife because women were not important. You only count the men's salary before real estate will sell you a house. All those changed, but it took about 30 years, more than 30 years. It takes time to change society and people. So that is the story. I can say the same thing for other states, nearby states, Missouri. That's a different kind of picture entirely. If you know the history of Missouri and the history of Kansas. Kansas was the free state. Kansas was the place where people went to during the Reconstruction from Tennessee, what we call the Black Exodus movement. Kansas is very famous for that. Kansas is the home of a lot of great people who are Black. They established special colony for them. Nicodemus, for example, was a town in Kansas established for free Blacks who were running away from whatever was going on in the South, either from Mississippi. You find a lot of Mississippi communities in Kansas, mostly from Tennessee. Pop Singleton, we call him Pop. He was the papa who organized the migration from Kansas. I also wrote a book about migration out of Kansas. They went there in the 1870s, and they started living Kansas in the 1960s and 70s. So I did a study of the children, the siblings of people who came to Kansas looking for free society, and then they got it. Next generation couldn't find that free society. They started. We always say Kansas is good at training its people, but for other communities, they never stay. They move on. You know about Gail Sayers, a great football player. You have all those names. Gordon, who was a great photographer. In all those come from Kansas. So I would say everywhere I go to, I find somebody from Kansas. Chuck was from Kansas. He came here, became dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences at the University of Florida, and they stole one of my good colleagues from Kansas to come out and become a director of African Studies at the University of Florida. He was with me as a young professor at the University of Kansas. I recruited him. He came here with his wife. So we have that kind of relationship between Kansas and University of Florida that's going on. I'm going to stop here for some questions. I want some dialogue. I don't know what time I have, so you let me know. I don't. Okay. Yeah.
We have any questions here? Let me check, Sue. Shirley, I saw your hand. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gordon. It's very impressive what you have done. I wonder what your take is now on the white Christian nationalism movement.
Well, maybe I should send a telegram to President Hayes. He started it. 1877, and it's going on. It's very easy for me to tell you that that's a crazy idea. I don't mind saying that. I don't believe in that kind of movement. It doesn't matter who does it, but this is called white Christian. I hear the phrase all the time. In fact, there was a senator, I believe, either from Ohio, Mississippi, who said, this is no, I think from Iowa. This is a Christian, white Christian America. And I'm saying, what? Did I study American history? White Christian America created this country. Now, that's not even debatable. All you got to do is to look at American history. How was this country created? Who created this country? The foundation for development in this country was called the plantation system. That was the foundation. In fact, there's a book entitled Capitalism and Slavery. There would have been no capitalism without slavery. There would have been no industrial revolution in Europe without slavery. Let's face it. It was the greatest means of production. And that's why there was a civil war. People wanted to maintain their plantation system. And somebody said, why? We need to get rid of that. They are getting into my pocket. States in the South were encouraged to become engaged in the transatlantic slave trade. You bring 20 slaves, you have 5 acres free of land. It's just simple. They are documented. Go to South Carolina, to the library there. Very highly specialized in Southern history. So, first of all, it's a lie. There is no such thing as white Christian nation in America. Never existed. We got everything, and they have come to confess, even the Pope. This country was built upon Pope Nicholas' theory of discovery. This is a long history. The theory of discovery, what does it mean? You come to any area not occupied by Catholics, take the land. Because that's our manifest destiny. And that became the cornerstone of our foreign policy. It allowed us to become colonialists. People always argue, America has never colonized anywhere. We don't colonize. Are you kidding me? How you define colonialism? What do we do in Latin America? What do we do in Africa, in Liberia? Robert Stone didn't go to Liberia because America did not approve it. A city known as Monrovia, named after President Monroe. I mean, all the traces in history, they are all there. And we still have some territories today in the Caribbean. Okay.
Other
Let me stop
questions?
there.
Got one there? Oh, I wonder.
Julie.
So, Jake, when you say that, there was a lot was accomplished by the Civil Rights Commissions, do we still have them today? I know there was some controversy about the appointment of a Civil Rights Commissioner a couple of presidents ago, that they did not have the same philosophy. If there was a lot of accomplished, do we just sort of go back in history, go back, go forward, go back and forward? How would you look at the progress that the Civil Rights Commission's made based on looking at what we're seeing right now?
I think the treatment we have given the Civil Rights Commission is very similar to what Supreme Court has done in terms of voting rights. There's a general impression that we have come so far, we have accomplished everything. There's no more racism in American society. And therefore, let's abolish all those laws that prohibited those kind of practices. So you don't hear the word Civil Rights Commission anymore. Okay, that's a problem. The reality, we know better now that this thing has not completely gone away. We wish they would go away. I was just reading the other day, in year 2002, a little community in Alabama, they wanted to integrate their prom in high school, say high school. And the white family said, hell no. We don't want integration of the prom. We don't want black and white. In that community, it was black majority, about 55%. The rest of them divided in white and other groups. So what happened? Two young women, one black, one white. They went to the principal and demanded integrated prom. They wanted the prom to be together, to be integrated, all the seniors. They did it that year. But even after that, the parents of the white kids decided to have their own private affair. They still want to stay segregated. This is 21st century. So this thing is not going away. And race issue, they have become globalized. It's not just here in America. I can talk about Europe for another hour. I can talk about France. I can talk about even Ukraine. With this war, there were Nigerians who were medical doctors. They told them they could not enter into the plane until all white people enter into the train to get out of Ukraine. So racism is a global issue, and UN is very aware of that. In fact, it's one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Okay.
Jacob, I know that you're retired, but it seems like you, another example of making retirement a full-time job. And we appreciate you joining our curriculum committee with ILR. Can you tell us some more of the projects that you're working on in our community?
Yeah, I brought this flyer here. I don't have enough. The Alachua County African American Historical Society was established 2 years ago. I saw a need for a community historical society to do something because the African American Studies program at University of Florida is still a program. It started the same year I went to Kansas, 1970. It has not been able to obtain an academic departmental status. I work in the advisory group of that program. They are still moving towards that to become a department that's recognized. Universities are giving PhDs in African American Studies from Harvard to Temple to University of Kansas, everywhere, except University of Florida. So we are working on that one. So East Coast Society is going to celebrate the bicentennial history of Alachua County. We will be 200 years old in December when the Florida Territorial Council established Alachua County in 1824. It doesn't mean that there were no people here then, because one of the first papers to be presented is to tell us the history of Native Americans who were here 12,000 years before everybody came here, or some Africans who helped Spanish people to explore Florida Little do we know about those people, but they are here. I have interns at the University of Florida, young people. I teach them how to conduct research. And just yesterday, we have our poster session. And the poster this year, this semester, is dealing with Black history makers in Florida. I was amazed to see great names out of Florida that we don't even remember. Not just Zora Hostin, but I'm talking about a lot of people, great musicians, great artists, the history of what do we call them? The highwaymen. You know what's called the highwaymen? People, Black folks who were artists, who couldn't sell their work. They had to go on the highway to sell their arts. There's a gallery in Tallahassee about the highwaymen in the history of Florida. It started right here at Fort Pierce. So there's a lot of great things about Florida that we need to celebrate while we continue to struggle towards a more perfect county, of a larger county. So we are working on that. Papers are going to be presented. There'll be a symposium. There'll be some entertainment. I'm looking for a musician who can trace the music that was played here 200 years ago to the present time. So if you know any musician, let me know.
Oh, we got to ask Don McLaughlin. He knows everybody.
Yeah. So music is very important in our life. There's no doubt about that. My wife did a Black Cowboys at the Cotton Club a couple of weeks ago. The assumption, she's from Texas, the assumption that cowboys are limited to white males from Texas. So we have to look at the history of cattle here and everything, thousands of years in Africa, from the Sahara to Kenya, before even America was born. So those are the kind of things that engage me to work on. Yes.
It's very exciting. It's hard for me to keep up with you during a meeting, all the ideas and all the presentations. What's next for us? What's our role with the Civil Rights Commission?
The Civil Rights Commission, even though people don't talk about it, we all should become civil writers. Because what do we mean by civil rights? Just respect of human dignity. To have that freedom that has been guaranteed to you, it's America's promise. King was talking about it all the time. It's in the books. Go and vote, the right to vote. But we have a group of political parties now who are making sure that Black folks don't vote because they want power. And when they get power, what do they do with it? Nothing. So the white supremacy is real. The group, we are moving from Ku Klux Klan to white supremacy. There will always be some groups like that. I don't think we ever get rid of race issue, at least not in my lifetime, not in America, because it's profitable to some group of people. As long as it's profitable, just like slave trade, people don't want to let it go. Even when America abolished slavery, transatlantic slave trade in 1808, just 1 year after the British Parliament, we were still doing what? Smuggling slaves into this place. Look at that African town in Alabama that we have just discovered, thanks to archaeologists and great scholars who are doing some research in this area. There is also the history of the underground saltwater underground railroad in Florida. People only think about the underground railroad going to Durban and the rest of it, but it's right here. They were moving from here to go to where? To the Bahamas. All that history is there. We got to do this to teach our people. We are working. I chair the African American Task Force history. The state has one. We have one in the county. We work with the school district in Alajua County to make sure that it's going to be beneficial for all students to learn about each other, our history from K to 12. So we are making some progress in that area. You know, from K to 12 ought to know something about our our history, our pride, our diversity, in my judgment, is our strength, not our weakness. That's what makes America great. I am an immigrant. I have immigrant mentality when I came here. And that immigrant mentality is to understand the system and develop something for America. Without immigrants, we are all immigrants. Whether you come from England or whether you come from where? Is it Jericho or from Africa? In fact, there are some studies right now that are beginning to indicate there were Africans in the New World before the transatlantic slave trade. Evidence everywhere. Go to Colombia, go to Mexico, you'll find Africa. Africa is everywhere. If we really believe scientifically that that is the genesis of the human race, the Homo sapien came out of that continent. We may have different colors. You go to Africa today, you see different colors. It can be black or brown or whatever. I don't know. God made all these people. I'm not God. So I don't know how I made them. The climate has impact in it. People keep on analyzing all this kind of stuff. So if we are all free, we enjoy the freedom, we can become more creative and continue to be the beacon for freedom and democracy that all human beings want to have everywhere in the world. Even animals want freedom, let alone human beings created in God's image.
Richard,
So-
any final thoughts?
Yes,
Please.
thank you for an inspiring and encouraging talk. I'm reminded of a quote from Ibram Kendi, who said, the civil rights movement is stalling because people think it happens automatically or it happened already. And what we need to realize is we have to work at it every day in every possible way. And you've inspired us, I think, to continue in that effort. So thanks very much, Jake.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Does that mean we are joined?